Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Inventing, the only show dedicated to dramatically impact the 98% failure rate by diving into the heart of inventors and innovation with diverse thought leaders from Fortune 500 companies, inventors, and experts who share their real-world stories about the products that we know and use every day. I'm deeply and convicted and passionate about changing that rate, the innovation, the success of the independent inventor. It's abysmal at 98%. Who knows what the real number is, right? But that's the number that's floating around, and I think it's horrible. So one of the ways that I aim to do that is with programs like this, where we can share tips, tricks, best practices, hacks from Fortune 500, like I say, and other companies, as well as service providers, to learn different ways that you can improve your odds for success. So tonight I have Matt. Help me with your last name. I never said it right, I don't think.
Simone.
Simone. Matt started his career with Ping as a senior research engineer, has been a manager of innovation for the last 2 years. And I have to tell you, living in Arizona, I've seen hundreds over the 2 decades that I've been doing this of golf innovations come across my desk. So while I don't play golf, I am aware of the various problems and challenges that people face who do, and how important it is to take any measure you can to improve your game. So this should be a really interesting conversation. I'm looking forward to it. I've been very excited to have this conversation with you, Matt. We met, about 2 years ago while I was working.
2 years ago, yeah.
Yeah. We were talking about what types of best practices you use for the front end innovation. And for our audience who doesn't know what that is, front end is the ideation part. So it's when you're identifying what the problem is and what potential solutions might be around that. And we had a lot of fun. So I know that this is going to be great. With that, Matt, let's get started.
Sure.
I always like to start with how you ended up in the wacky world of innovation.
Yeah, my background story is not very normal. So I started going to school with thoughts of going to medical school. So I started in biomedical engineering. That was really my main focus. Did undergrad, ended up pairing it with material science, focusing on tissue engineering, implant devices, things like that. Went to graduate school, completely focused in that world, and then graduated with a master's degree. And my graduate work was even further away from the golf world. It was analytical chemistry, protein engineering, things like that. And then I came out in 2008 when the economy was simply booming and nobody was hiring. And so I actually jumped back to the hard metals world and worked for a specialty metals company. And then eventually got to the point where I liked my job, but I was working in areas like truck trailer, aerospace, stuff like that, things that weren't really super exciting. And played golf in college and played golf my whole life and thought, okay, well, people use metals in golf, so I probably have some use here, and just searched around and ended up finding my way to Ping, fortunately, in the innovation group, and then have been here ever since.
Good for you. I mean, that's smart strategy. Figure out what you love.
Yeah, well, it was kind of twofold. It was either could I play? I was pretty good at the time. I'm still fairly good at golf. Less so
he says humbly, I'm sure.
a lot less so with kids nowadays. So it was either play, which is a huge financial burden to try to do it yourself, or it was create equipment. And I've always been a huge equipment junkie and stuff like that. So it was kind of 1A, 1B, and it's certainly worked out okay.
So in your career path, then when you found yourself in metals and some of these other industries, were they innovation roles?
They were product roles for sure. It was mostly problem solving. So people like in Amana would buy our material to make, fume hoods or refrigerators or whatever, and they would have either questions on how to make the material perform better, cut costs, or they had material that they had received that had issues doing, whatever they were trying to perform, whether they're wrapping it or they're trying to buff it or provide a finish or something like that. So I was problem solving. I wasn't like inventing new alloys per se. It was more of, once the product was already made, how do we make it perform for the customer's needs?
So tell me a little bit more then about your role now as an innovation manager at Ping.
Yeah, so innovation manager. So really I'm trying to, I provide guidance to the team, and we have a pretty diverse group. We have aerospace engineers, we have mechanical engineers, we have physicists that work for our team and stuff like that. And really, I try to help take their ideas. We try to document them properly. We try to take all the necessary steps to spec out the technology so that when we pass it to the design team who's physically designing the golf clubs, we've done our homework and they feel comfortable incorporating that technology into, whatever the next driver or irons or whatever it may be. Now, there's still development work we need to do from there. But we try to, spec out the technology as much as we can from a durability, performance, cost, manufacturing standpoint, as much as we can, so that they don't have to spend the time doing that.
So when you're identifying problems that need to be solved, is that coming from your consumers, or is that just going out and about watching people play golf? How do you do that?
It's really a couple different ways. So we definitely get feedback from our sales reps. They provide a ton of, because they're with a customer every single day. We are all pretty much either we're collegiate golfers or casual golfers. So we're all playing a lot of golf. So we kind of see what people are struggling with. Mm-hmm. We also loop back internally on our designs and say, okay, did we hit our design goals? Where did something fall short and whatnot? And then kind of the last way, and something that comes a lot from our group is studying really the physics of golf, understanding it at a very fundamental basic research level. Like, okay, you have an iron, there's water between the ball and the face, what happens? And you build really these limit curves that kind of identify the variables and how they interact. And then from there, the technologies that we try to create are there to break those limit curves. So we try to basically break physics as much as we possibly can. And then from there, once we kind of identify what the problems are and where those limits are, then we try to say, okay, can we create a technology to kind of get us over that hump and go from there? So that's really the main areas where we kind of develop our ideas from.
It's interesting that it comes from the sales force. And let me come back to that in just a second. For those of you who are just joining us, this is live. So if you have any questions or comments that you'd like to leave in the chat, please feel free to do that. I will circle back and check on those questions periodically throughout our program here this evening. Do you find that the feedback that you're getting from either the buyers or the sales force, which I assume is coming from the demand in the market, mm-hmm. Are they telling you just the problems they have, or are they making suggestions for solutions? And I say that because with this in mind, if I go to a consumer and say, I need a French twist, my hair barrette mm-hmm. ultimately came out of that. But if I say I need a French twist, they don't necessarily know that really what I'm looking for is a cool updo. So there are lots of ways that I could solve that problem. I'm just addressing the wrong problem, mm-hmm. right? Mm-hmm. Like the jobs to be done theory kind of thing. So how do you, when you get that kind of feedback, how do you assess what the problem is and measure whether that's really something that's in demand for the market and a problem we're solving a certain way?
Well, the biggest problem we usually have is most people don't know what they want or what they need, actually. They know what they want, but they don't know what they need.
Right.
Usually you have to go out and see what they're doing, either on the driving range or the golf course. And actually, recently we did a partnership with Arcos. So Arcos is, let me grab one real quick.
I love that you have show and tell.
Yeah, so Arcos is these devices you stick in the butt end of the club, and it actually emits a radio frequency that your telephone or your cellular phone can read with its microphone. And you have all of these connected to the ends of your clubs, and they use that for statistics tracking. So all of these are connected to your clubs, and then from that, we get information, or the consumer gets information in an app, and then we get information as well from that. And really, that allows us to know, because if you have these in all your clubs, you can tell, okay, you want to have what's called good gapping. So you want to, because you have 14 clubs in your bag, 13 full swing clubs in that putter, you want the spacing between all those clubs to be fairly even, so that when you have a distance on a golf course, you know what club to hit. So a lot of times with a lot of people on the lower end with more loft, they have good consistent gapping, but then because it's hard, if they're not creating enough speed or whatever, they tend to bunch up at the top end of the bag. And really, they may not know that. But when you have these and then you have GPS, then we can get that data. and we can make suggestions like, I think you should change a club or try a different club, or we can suggest tweaks, and they can work with their reps and whatnot to try different things in order to solve that. So a lot of what we're trying to figure out is through data harvesting, and understanding, because like I said, a lot of times people they know what they want to happen, but they don't necessarily know how to get there. And so we need to analyze either their swing or their kind of their performance that they're currently getting out of their current product. And then that allows us kind of, with the product that's already there, kind of solve that problem. And then if we don't have a club to solve that problem, then that's really where we go back to the drawing board and say, okay, we need to create a club to fix this problem, because we've seen it from a lot of different people.
That device is something that's on the market that any golfer can use?
So Arcos is its own independent company, so you can go out and buy
That's
these.
so cool.
We now include them, I think there's a small upcharge for it, with the G410 product and stuff.
Brilliant.
Yeah, so we have a partnership.
On the golf course, you can find out how your swing is going versus having to go into those studios that I saw come up.
Right, exactly. Yeah, and then the app they have is very cool, because it shows, it's used also to kind of see where you are on the golf course. And once you collect enough data, it'll suggest, hit this club here, this is what the wind's doing. So it's a really neat app, and that's why we partnered with them. There's a bunch of these on the marketplace. This one was kind of the one that was the best from what we saw.
Super cool. Good for them.
Yeah.
Well, you make a really good point in that people know what they want to achieve. They know the job they want to have done.
Right.
They don't know how to go about solving that. And I think even in more often, in my experience, they don't even necessarily know the bottom line of the job that they want done. So I want a hammer. Well, why? Because I want to bang a nail.
What are you trying to accomplish with that tool, right?
Right, exactly. So it's about hanging the picture, and are there other ways? Do I really want a hammer? There are other ways to hang a picture. So in that example, what kinds of people do you think make the best innovators or inventors?
So when we do interviews and stuff like that, and I've been involved in a pretty good amount of hiring in the short time that I've been manager, we've had a bit of turnover in our team, which has been just people, moving on and other things coming up in life. But it's really allowed us to kind of build a team now of people that question. I think the best inventors are the types of people that really like to ask why. So they see something on TV, or they see something on Twitter, or they see something in the news, and it's not just, oh, that's neat, and it goes in one ear and out the other. It spurns like 10 Google searches, and then they want to like dive into something, and they want to kind of understand, like, okay, that's a really cool technology, but how does it work? Why does it work like that? And when you start to dig into the why, then you start to see how it's applicable. For instance, I was on a trip, and this is pre-kids, we got into scuba diving. And so we saw this like really cool whale in the water, and then when we came up to the boat, we were with some pretty experienced divers, and they're like, what's this kind of whale? And then swims this fast, and it's really, really neat. And I'm like, that's amazing. And so I started to look into it more, and it turns out the way they had evolved, they had created this structure on their surface, which basically reduced the amount of drag from the water. And there have been people that have developed that for like the sailboat racing for the America's Cup and stuff like that.
Sure.
And so they had those structures. They actually put them on the swimsuits that were banned and stuff like that from the Olympics. Those like skin suits that they had like 10 years ago or whatever, where everyone was breaking all the world records. And so I was looking into, okay, could I create this structure on like a driver head? Because drag in water is the same thing as drag in the air. Drag is drag.
Sure.
It's just water tends to be a little worse because it's just a thicker medium. So it's things like that where you kind of hear something, and we've done a decent amount of biomimetics in our product, but it's really just trying to look for information kind of where you can kind of find it and whatnot.
And when you're working with that type of team who asks why, the potential for conflict comes up, I would assume. So there's pushback. How do you foster or cultivate an environment where people can innovate together and also push back on things?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's a lot of collaboration that we go through, and I apologize, they're vacuuming behind me in my office.
No, it's fine. I can barely hear it.
There's a little bit of feedback.
It's my fault for keeping you after work this late.
No, you're fine. I, we have kind of our office structure. It's not open office. It's not completely cubicle. So I think when you have ideas and did you see this? That's a nice thing. We got a bunch of pretty nerdy people, and I mean that only in a positive sense. Everyone kind of geeks out on stuff, and we think, in general, technology is cool. So whenever we interview people, we're always asking, like, what's the coolest thing you've seen in the last couple of years? And it could be, we had an interview with a kid recently we just hired, and it was like a backpack. And you're like, okay, that doesn't apply to golf at all. But then you listen to the way he talked about it and the things that it did and how it distributed weight and stuff like that. And you're like, okay, well, golf clubs have mass, they have center of gravities, they have things like all these things, all these physics principles are all applicable, even though, we're not trying to make backpacks. The soft goods group is.
Right.
We're not, but all this stuff is still very applicable.
Sure.
So if you're digging into trying to understand like why that is a cool tech and what that allows the human body to do, it's all a human performance thing that we're trying to do.
So in that process of innovating, are there some best practices or processes that you found to be the most effective in evaluating the ideas and determining what you're going to move forward with? And
yeah, I mean, and I kind of talked about this with understanding golf physics. We try to do as much basic research as possible, and I think that's important for anyone to, whether you're studying physics or you're studying why somebody struggles with a certain technology or a certain action that you're trying to solve for. You have to fundamentally understand what the problem is, and then you can invent a technology to kind of solve that problem. So that's really our best practice: is do basic research, understand what's going on at a very fundamental level, and then when you try to create and design things, now it's more of an applied research action. And then from there, fail fast, try to get it done as much as possible, do as much, simple prototyping that you can do. And it's a little harder for what we do. It's not quite as easy. We do have the ability to have a full machine shop here and stuff like that, so we can do some pretty gnarly things. But we try to fail fast as quickly as possible and iterate on that idea, but do the fundamental research first, because if you just start designing before you understand exactly what's going on, then you could just come in this recursive loop constantly where you don't know what variable is really the problem or what's causing the unintended outcome. And so you don't really know where to circle back on. So you're just kind of like throwing stuff at a wall and hoping it sticks. So I think, in our business and in really any business, if you can have an understanding of what's going on first, then you can try to iterate around that problem, and you try to single out variables. That makes your life a lot easier, and then document that stuff as much as possible. We've an extensive knowledge library on our intranet, internal only to our employees, that is a wealth of an unbelievable amount of knowledge that new employees can come in and say, hey, I kind of have this idea. Okay, well, 5 other people tried it. The manufacturing technology could be old, so read what they did, see what they did, so we don't repeat the same mistakes over again. And then if there's something new that can allow us to maybe create this technology, then kind of go down that route, but see where we've been before, and then try to find what's new.
Right. Now, iteration is something that I think we, particularly first-time inventors, overlook. They think the first idea is the best idea, and so they run off and get a patent on it, which is not cheap.
Yeah.
And then later find out it's not manufacturable,
Right.
or for whatever reason, efficacy reasons, it doesn't work. And that's unfortunate. Is there a time that, I'm not like that, but is there a time where you maybe did your due diligence and went through the intranet and tested things and iterated, and then were sure it was going to be a great idea, pass that baton to the other team members that then had to commercialize it, and it didn't work?
It would never, the way our process works, it would never make it to a commercial product if we didn't have the data to back up the show that it works. So we're very lucky because the company was founded on engineers. I mean, it may manufacture different than we intended, and so we may not get quite the effect. And then that's something that we'll circle back on as we look at our next product line. But the company was founded by an aerospace engineer, a mechanical engineer, and it's now in the 3rd generation of family ownership, and they want to see it's a data-driven company. And so it doesn't get out our doors unless it performs better. So we don't really have that problem, fortunately.
Well, when you say performs better, does that mean it was that all of those products that you've brought to market have been successes?
They may not necessarily have been successes, but when we spec out and we do our testing on our clubs, it has to have performance differences that meet the goals of the product of the project.
Mm-hmm.
It may not work its way out in the marketplace like that. And so then we'll circle back and say, okay, we saw this in house. Why didn't we necessarily see that out in the field? And then that could spur either new innovation or a look back on manufacturing, some problem solving like that.
I see. And
Yeah.
I'm sure that's when the salespeople can be really helpful.
100%. Yeah. Because we're saying, okay, it's supposed to do this and this and this. Did it do that? If it didn't, okay, are they not getting the same, are we having manufacturing issues with our supplier where it's not being made as intended? If that's the case, is it just because we have tolerance stack up or whatever, it's just not, possible to, you kind of have this, wide berth of tolerances that you try to stay within. Is it just not feasible for the tech, for the manufacturing technology? And then maybe we need to take a step back and look at ways to kind of improve that instead of looking at making a new technology itself.
Do you have any examples of products that you've either learned greatly from because of your own mistakes or someone else's mistakes that you learned the best lessons from?
I mean, the work that I do individually, my project work stems from, incorporating materials. So a lot of what I do is trying to find new materials that you put in the face of a driver.
So what is that?
So these are all titanium based. So we get basically take rolled sheet of material, you form it
Cool.
to this curved surface, and then it's welded inside this body. So a lot of times what I do is, we spec this out not in this shape, but in just your general, what are called tensile specimens. They're basically just rectangles. And you spec out the material on a very general basis with its properties. And a lot of times I'll look at a material and it'll seem really good. But then once you put it inside here, it may not weld the same. It may not be quite as durable as you would thought. Sometimes the structure changes. So, we always try to figure out, okay, the easiest thing to do is to spec it on a very fundamental level with those bars. So we try to figure out, how do those, kind of connect to this, and what does that mean for when people are going to, hit it with a golf ball and stuff like that. So sometimes we get there and we kind of have some really good, kind of curves and understandings of that. But, sometimes we get a material and that kind of doesn't behave the way we think it will. So when I have samples made and I do some testing on it, it doesn't exactly perform as well as I wanted it to. That's happened recently with a couple different materials.
Interesting.
It's a bit disappointing because you're trying to replace what you currently have with something that's better. On paper, it seems better, but then when you put it into the actual club head, it ends up not being better, which is, part of the process. You're supposed to be processed with a growth mindset, right? But
Right, right.
it's still frustrating because that's really what my
Well,
project.
yeah, especially when you've spent probably a significant amount of time
Yeah.
getting it to the point where you could have that model made and tested.
Right, exactly. So, but
So
if the model does break it, then it's like, okay, maybe we need to switch our model a little bit. Maybe our model's not completely correct. So that can kick off some good kind of fundamental research that we'll do.
I think it's great to know that even in a large organization and one that's as successful as a brand like Ping,
Yeah.
that you still don't know what you don't know until you
Yeah.
get, and you
Absolutely.
have to validate through each of those steps, what's working, what's not. And even with all your knowledge and engineering expertise and the intranet that you have with all that data, it's still something you have to test.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah,
Day, right?
we're test heavy. That's the majority of, we have a whole testing department. It's like 20 people strong. And,
Wow.
we do a lot. We're very data heavy, which can sometimes overwhelm our suppliers because some of our competitors aren't quite to that level, but it's the only way we know how to do it. And it's the reason why a private company as small as we are, we're only about 900 people globally, are sitting, comfortably number 3 in the marketplace, trying to, come after number 1 and number 2, which are publicly traded companies that are way, way bigger than we are. So.
Wow. So you started to say earlier when you're interviewing folks and you're looking for the right type of person, for example, to be a part of your team, there are certain people types that you're looking for.
Mhm.
what is it? What do you think what type of mindset makes the best inventor?
I talked about that growth mindset, which I'm trying to develop a little bit more. I am a product. I'm an
Do it
80s.
live right now.
I'm an 80s child, so I'm very results driven. Really, I mean, the best people are ones that love to try, don't mind failing, and actually enjoy it. I mean,
Yeah.
I listen to a lot of, Gary Vee's stuff, and
Oh yeah.
he gets all crazy about, I love it when I fail and stuff, and I'm like, I hate when I fail. I like when I you always learn more from what fails, because you circle back and try to figure out why, and then you get fundamentally deeper into it, versus when something works, you kind of celebrate it and you push it along, and then it goes. So really, the people that I think are best inventors are people that love that grind. They love the process of discovery,
Mhm.
not so much like the end result is almost a bit of a letdown because the process is over.
Yeah.
And it's hard, it's hard to love that. It's hard to love that process, because it can be
It's,
super frustrating sometimes.
it's the learning, I think, that Gary Vee's talking about, right?
Yes, absolutely.
It's not, nobody likes to fail,
No, 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 no.
but learning, growing, developing, evolving feels good when you get to the other side.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah,
And
when you come out of it and you learn stuff, you're like, oh, okay, I just became smarter from that. That's super cool.
which is going to make you more successful in the long run,
Yeah.
right? Because you won't make that mistake again.
Yep.
Every time you try a new material, I'm sure that's what it's like. It's a bit of a disappointment, but the learning that comes from it, who knows? Maybe now that you know what that does, maybe that turns into an innovation at some point, because that's the intention, is to have that change,
Absolutely, yeah.
right?
Hmm.
Um, what do you think is the single most important advice you would give to our audience, particularly in the golf, but not exclusively, industry? If they have an idea and they want to go for it mentally, how do they keep their head right? And tactically, what step or steps would you encourage them to make? And I know that's loaded, but there you go.
Yeah, I completely agree with what you said about don't become blind just because you have one idea. And
Mm.
it's easy for us because we have a team, so we can poke a bunch of holes in things with each other, and that can get egos flying around and whatnot. But really, you if you take if you take a step back and you look at what you've invented, okay, did I solve that problem? I really think I did, but take a step back and almost put it away for a little while, as much as you possibly can. That might
Yeah,
be
that's good.
what their career is, but take a step back, take some time away, have other people look at it, show it to other people that you trust that won't like steal your idea and whatnot. You got to get feedback, because a lot of people view things very differently. And I
Mhm.
think that's very important, because then you can start to see viewpoints that you didn't necessarily see. And it can certainly, very rarely when you get that feedback, does it make your invention worse. It doesn't make your technology worse. It can only make it better. At worst, it's neutral, right? You try to incorporate it and
Sure.
it doesn't really work. So you're like, okay, well, I'm still at a good spot. Um, I think that, and uh, that's very important. I think also it's experiencing areas of life that are very unrelated to what you do. Right now, I'm crazy about a Netflix series called Abstract, the Art of Design,
Oh, I just
which
finished
is,
it.
absolutely phenomenal, and
Yeah,
it's stuff that is very unrelated to what I do. But it's
all
still just
design.
the process and stuff like that, and the things that they're looking at. You can pull so much if you really like internalize it from areas that are so far away from what you do. I'd say that can make someone, and that's what we look for when we interview. We like to see people interested in things that are almost off the wall from what we're doing,
Yeah,
because it means that their mind is open to the world and they can really learn some really cool things. And you can be inspired in so many different ways.
sure.
I think that's like super important as well.
When I'm uh, as I get older, I learn to appreciate and enjoy differences. When I was younger, it was very challenging because different made me feel insecure,
Hmm.
right? So I felt like I had to either stand up for my position and defend it,
Yep.
or cower because you must know something I don't know, and kind of lose myself in it. And now
Right.
what I love and appreciate is when I show this idea baby that I have to someone who I trust and respect, maybe who is an expert in the field of technology, for example, or
Yep.
whatever. I'm not talking about just my mother or friends
Yeah.
or whatever. And when I'm getting that feedback, I want the pushback. break it. Tell me why it won't work. So that I can make an intelligent decision, either to change how I'm pitching it, because obviously they didn't get it if they didn't like it,
Right.
or fix whatever it is that they've pointed out and make sure that that's not going to be something that stops me in the future. And collaboration with diversity, people who think different, to your point, can create conflict. But if you know how to resolve that well, I've seen the greatest innovation come from those types of conversations.
I feel like conflict is only a problem when the communication is poor. If it's communicated effectively and it's not said with ego or malice or kind of attacking words. And we have a lot of smart people. When you get a lot of PhDs in a room, it can be a war of words for sure, and a war of brains. But I've seen some really awesome conversation come out of people that had very big disagreements, but they presented their thoughts respectfully. They presented their thoughts without, it was simply, well, I've seen this. This is the data that supports that. The numbers don't lie. So I think if you present thoughts and feelings and you get thoughts and feelings from other people, and it's rooted in experience, or experience is data. A lot of things can be data. And even intuition can be data, because your brain builds intuition based on repeated actions and stuff like that. So yeah, I think if people can present their thoughts back to you, or you can present your thoughts to another person in a way that is, completely subjective, then it's not, or sorry, completely, yeah. If you present it in a way that's not, attacking the person, but really just looking at the idea, then I think that's when you can have really good back and forth and things like that.
And it's aimed at the subject matter, not at the person. Yeah, exactly. It's funny that you brought up abstract, because I was actually just a couple weeks ago having lunch with my son, who is in school to be a developer and full stack developer. And I recommended that he watch it, because he's, when you're learning about UI, UX, all of that, as well as the data points and how to put it all together, understanding design. And there was one episode in particular where I think it was the head of design for Etsy. Did you see that one? So good. Yeah. And their approach, there were a few episodes actually that were similar in that they were just addressing having that collaboration and all the different ideas that go up on the wall, but how they respect and challenge with that respect. I think there are a lot of married couples who could take that same advice. By the way, that's another show though. We won't go there.
A different topic base.
Oh my God, it's fun. So, okay, my last question for you is for anybody who's watching or listening in the future who may have a golf invention. Does Ping license outside, and does it accept outside invention submissions?
We certainly accept outside inventions. We try to do as much as possible in-house. We have our own, team of patent lawyers and things like that on staff, because actually the golf patent landscape is a complete minefield. It is.
Yeah.
From a person that came from the outside that works for a company now that we used to farm stuff out to, and now he works for us full time. He's like, this is worse than pharmaceuticals. This is worse than medical devices. I'm like, I can't even believe that's true, but it's a minefield. So,
wow.
Yeah, for sure. We definitely listen to people. Like I said, we were saying kind of offline, if they can reach out to me, we'll probably, the best way for us to spec out a technology is to try to fit it into a body that already exists. And like I said, we can control the variables from there. So yeah, if people want to reach out to me, they have an idea, hit me up on LinkedIn or some other.
At what stage would you like them to be before they reach out to you? How prepared do you need them to be?
I mean, it's hard for people to have the robust amount of testing that we would need to perform. And usually it's in a body that that it's hard for us to kind of single out variables. So it doesn't need to be super developed. It should be maybe a little bit more than just a napkin drawing. But if it can be a little bit developed, we're gonna put it through its paces on our side anyway. So if you have it in a store or whatever, like that's fine. We're still gonna put it inside our embodiment and spec it out and whatnot, and do our due diligence.
Patented or patent pending, does that matter?
No, not really. Yeah.
Okay. And how can people reach you if they'd like to do that?
Yeah. So if you want to find me on LinkedIn, I think it's probably linked to this.
It's
Probably
Matthew,
the easiest way to do it. Yeah. Matthew
Matthew
Simone.
Simone.
Yep. At Ping Golf. That's probably the easiest. And my email is matthewsi@ping.com. Would be the other way.
Oh, well, I hope that it doesn't like all of a sudden flood your inbox or anything. I don't think my audience is that big yet, but you know what? It's the
Could be
internet. So
growing.
you could go viral, man.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for taking the time to do this. This was
Yeah.
really
Absolutely.
helpful. Very, very interesting. The key takeaway for me, I have to say, is just that the rigorous testing that you put it through, and because you have all of that data, I see that being more of a challenge for folks who don't have that. But it has clearly influenced the success trajectory for your products, and anything that we can do, I think, to do a better job of validating through that type of testing is probably something that we should consider more seriously.
If you can put it through its paces, then you can. We have a lot of trust in our technology because we do so much testing that when people question it, we're like, just try it, see what happens. And that's what we always say. If you can try our stuff and put it up against what you use, just try it. The technology will speak for itself. We don't need a huge marketing budget. Like, we have a decent marketing budget, but we don't need to be driven by that because the technology and the engineering will speak for itself. You can't fight physics, and so you can't really fight that stuff. So
Like you
if
said, the numbers don't lie,
the
right?
numbers don't lie, right? So if people have an invention and they put it through its paces, then you can trust in that invention because you've seen it work, and so then you can put your heart and soul into getting it out there. And I think when you put your heart and soul into something, that's when people can kind of feel that passion and that energy from it, and they're like, okay, well, this must really work because this person's like about to jump down my throat about it because it's not just because they just want to get it to market. It's because in the back of your mind, this really works. I've seen it work. I've tried to make it not work, and it just works. So
Can't break it.
right, exactly.
That's awesome. Thank you again. And thank you all so much for joining us. Please join us again next week. If you have not already, check out lloydmarketinggroup.com, where you can subscribe to be updated each week on who our guests will be and what the subject will be for that week, as well as registering for free future episodes. You'll also be able to see past episodes as I get them posted each week. It's usually within a few days of having produced this live program. So keep checking back. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us, and we'll see you real soon. Love you all. Thank you, Matt.
No problem. Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.